right. Welcome everyone. Thank you again for joining us. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and share what you do for veterans, where you are, and how people can reach you. Good afternoon and welcome to Invisible No More, a Transgender Day of Visibility conversation with New York State Veterans Services and SAGEVets. My name is Kristen Rouse. I am a proud veteran of the United States Army, and I serve as Deputy Director for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion here at New York State DVS. I use she, her pronouns, and I identify as gender non-conforming. I am thankful for Ashton Stewart and our partners at SAGEVets. I am so proud of the program and panelists SAGE helped us to put together for today, and I am grateful that all of you have chosen to spend your lunchtime with us. In 2009, transgender activist Rachel Crandall of Michigan founded International Transgender Day of Visibility to celebrate individuals who identify as transgender and to raise awareness of the discrimination that these individuals face worldwide. Today, millions of people around the world recognize March 31st as a day of celebration, honor, and recognition for individuals who are transgender. Estimates show that as many as 15,000 transgender individuals are currently serving in the United States military. Despite a history of policies that prevented individuals who are transgender from serving openly, a study in 2015 showed that people who are transgender are twice as likely as members of the general population in the United States to serve in the military. Last year, on Transgender Day of Visibility, President Biden issued an executive order overturning prior policies that forced service members out of the military on the basis of gender identity. President Biden's executive order, which marks its one-year anniversary of effectiveness today, prohibits discrimination in military service on the basis of gender identity and calls for a re-examination of the service members who were involuntarily discharged or denied re-enlistment under the previous administration's policy. Here in New York, we recognize that the military service of transgender, non-binary, intersex, and gender non-conforming individuals goes all the way back to the American Revolution, to heroes like General Casimir Pulaski, and the Civil War with individuals like Private Lyons Wakefield, who served and lived their lives in a gender other than what they were biologically born as. And our military history throughout has had members like Dr. Mary Edwards Walker, whose gender presentation did not conform to societal norms. Bronx-born World War II veteran Christine Jorgensen lived openly as transgender, but the road has been long and hard for these veterans. They have long faced discrimination, exclusion, harm, and even violence in American society and in official military policies. We have a great deal of work still ahead in ensuring our veterans and communities and the services we provide are equitable and accessible to veterans who identify as transgender, non-binary, intersex, and gender non-conforming. I'd like to take this time during our program to make a noteworthy announcement about our work here at New York State DVS. As of this month, I'm proud to announce that we as an agency have updated our veteran client management system to include a Gender X gender identity option, ensuring that we serve all clients with dignity and in recognition of their authentic identity. Our client management system update is part of a statewide effort focusing on improving gender inclusivity brought about by Governor Hochul's State of the State initiative to implement the Gender Recognition Act. Since November 2020, we here at DVS have also served veterans who are transgender through the Restoration of Honor Act, a state statute that permits the division to restore access to New York State benefits for veterans who were wrongfully received a less than honorable administrative discharge on the basis of gender identity, gender expression, or sexual orientation, or on the basis of a service-related mental health condition. Working with our partners at SAGE, we have already reviewed and granted favorable decisions in several dozen restoration of honor applications, and we look forward to receiving even more. Please let us know if you have any candidates for this or any questions. We would love to hear from you. This Transgender Day of Visibility, we bring you this important conversation with powerful and amazing veterans and advocates who we'll hear from in just a moment. But first, I want to bring you greetings from our director, Marine Corps veteran Viviana DeCohen. She is out in the field again today, but she has recorded a message of welcome for us that I'm going to share with you momentarily here.
Hello. Today is Transgender Day of Visibility. It is dedicated to raising awareness of the many discriminations faced by the transgender population worldwide. It is also a day to celebrate the many accomplishments and contributions to society. Today, it has been declared that they are invisible no more.
I love it. Thank you, Director DeCohen. I know if she's not able to log on, she will definitely be watching this video later. So we are so proud to have an agency-wide and a statewide commitment to serving all of our veterans. First up, as a speaker, before we get to all of our panelists, I want to introduce to you Jenna Frazier, who is the Edie Windsor, Marsha P. Johnson, and Sylvia Rivera LGBTQ Fellow in the office of Governor Kathy Hochul. We are so glad to be joined by Jenna today, and I've asked Jenna to please talk about some of the successes that we've had recently as a state. This is a time when there's so much discrimination happening nationwide, particularly for our trans community and trans kids, trans families. So we definitely want to begin with the good news here in New York State. So please take it away, Jenna.
Thank you so much, Kristen. And thank you, of course, Director DeCohen and DVS for inviting us here today, bringing us together to take part in this really special celebration, because that's what it is in a lot of ways. And this is the first of many events today that we're so excited to see happening here in the great state of New York. I'm so honored to be here on behalf of the governor and the governor's office. And again, thank you for the invitation. As you said, my name is Jenna Frazier. My pronouns are they and she. And even again, as you named in my title, there's two very strong trans women right there in the name of my title who, I'm so glad we're bringing their names into this space to really celebrate all that they've done for our community and to really push forward for our civil rights. So of course the governor unfortunately could not be here, but she did issue a letter that I'm just going to read a quick part of to kind of bring that into the space as well. So dear friends, it is a pleasure to send greetings to everyone gathering across New York State to celebrate the 2022 Transgender Day of Visibility. This Day of Visibility also honors courageous leaders like Marsha P. Johnson, a transgender woman of color who was on the front lines of the Stonewall Uprising. We remember Marsha and other trans pioneers of the LGBTQ movement who fought for the equality and safety of their community. New York continues to lead the way thanks to the tireless efforts of many past and present advocates, activists, and partners who share our commitment to building a state that is welcoming to everyone. Together, we will always stand with and for the rights and dignity of our transgender community. So from Kathy Hochul. And I would, just to add to that on a more personal note, for me as a gender fluid person, I'm so proud to be a part of this great administration and to work for a state that does continue to fight for our community. As Kristen said, even more so at a time like we're at now, where there are some pretty unprecedented attacks against our community and legislation. But to get to the good news, right? On a legislative level, Governor Hochul has really accomplished a lot in these past 6 months, and this administration has put forth that work. Just this past October, during Transgender Day or Transgender Week of Awareness, Governor Hochul signed several bills that offer more protection to our TGNC and B+ community. Those include the START Act, which is the Survivors of Trafficking Attaining Relief Together Act, which was signed in October during that week, which relates to vacating convictions for offenses committed due to being a victim of sex trafficking or labor trafficking and compelling prostitution, which, as we know, disproportionately impacts, in particular, transgender women of color. That week, Governor Hochul also signed a bill requiring that utility companies use customers' requested names and pronouns, which again makes a big impact in our day-to-day life and experience. Of course, also too, as Kristen had mentioned, the governor put forth a number of proposals in this year's State of the State, one of them being the expansion of the Gender Recognition Act. And congrats to DVS for really pushing that forward and getting that win. We're very proud to see that. And just earlier this month, we have convened the LGBTQ Interagency Task Force, where we got to hear from many agencies across the enterprise on both some of the challenges, of course, of putting forth this Gender Recognition Act and the successes, like Kristen named here today, of really getting that pushed within agencies so that folks are able to accurately recognize and depict their gender in forms. So very proud of that. And of course, there's more work to do. There's more work to be done. On another note too, we're also very proud that right here in Governor Hochul's executive chamber, our community does have a seat at the table, so to speak. There are more people of trans experience working in the governor's office than in any previous administration. And that representation is not just here in chamber, that also includes our transgender, gender non-conforming, and non-binary leaders across state agencies, many of which are both on the panel here today, and I'm sure in attendance as well in the audience. So of course, this representation also really helps to amplify our voice in state government and is crucial in ensuring that we are not only visible, but that we do keep pushing and keep fighting for change. So with that, I will actually drop contact information in the chat as well for myself, along with our Director of LGBTQ Affairs, Ron Zaki, and our Deputy Director, Chanel Lopez, both of whom have previous commitments today, but also send their welcoming greetings to everyone here. And also, please feel free to reach out to me or any of us at any time if you have updates, questions, concerns, about things impacting our community or accomplishments that we should be celebrating, because they are many. So with that, I will thank you and just say happy Transgender Day of Visibility. And I'll turn it back to Kristen.
Thank you so much, Jenna. Truly appreciate your work, and and I'm so proud to see so much continued work in the area of inclusion that, with several of you now at the forefront leading from the governor's office and our robust, reconfigured LGBTQ task force. Proud to serve on that at the forefront of making change, and just really this is such a time to appreciate that this is national leadership, and it makes me proud to be a New Yorker, and it makes me proud to live here, and it makes me feel a lot safer living here. And so thank you for the work that you do. Really appreciate your time today. I know it's a busy day, so really appreciate you being here. So we're going to get right to this. I want to feature our veterans who are on the panel. We have some tremendous advocates, but I really wanted to put at the forefront our veterans who identify as transgender. And so I first want to introduce Owen Gilbo, who I'm proud to know as a fellow member of the LGBTQ task force, and who has done great work in state government. Currently works for the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historical Preservation, but has done great work in civil service and in his career. But Owen, I just want to ask you to spend a few minutes sharing your story and your experience with us.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me to be on the panel. I'm really happy. I'm fairly new to New York State Historic Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation. I am proudest of the fact that New York State Parks has we have the Marsha P. Johnson State Park in Brooklyn, New York, which is undergoing some renovations, and hoping a grand opening in June during Pride Month. And I was down there on Sunday, able to participate in a Transgender Day of Visibility, and I had the opportunity to talk to a few of Marsha P's family members. And one of the things that came up in discussion is, you know, we've come a long way from when Marsha P threw the first brick, and the fact that, you know, I'm an out trans man working in state government, working to help ensure the rights of our TGNCNB citizens. So that was really special, and I have had some time in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion Management with civil service, and so that work, and I want to make a shout out to New York State government in that, and we have a transgender, it's a gender identity toolkit, and it's extensive, and everyone, over 153,000 individuals that work in New York State government they were mandated to take this training, and it does a great job of explaining, you know, providing definitions, for explaining pronouns, for talking about using gender neutral language, and rules for managers that, you know, or guidelines for managers in helping individuals transition in government, and also for other staff members to be allies, and so on and so forth. So very proud of that. And we continue to work on training. And just briefly, I did some gender identity training. This was actually before I was at Parks, but with Parks Peer Support Group. Their question for me was, these are the individuals that go out to parks where people in the park have discovered perhaps a body. We know, unfortunately, parks are a place where people die by suicide or by murder or other means. And also, excuse me, drownings or any of those really worst day situations. And their question to me was, how do we not make a person's worst day worse? How do we understand gender identity? You know, how do we use pronouns? What if we make a mistake? So we had a really excellent discussion around that, and that discussion will continue on for other parts of parks. But I'm a U.S. Navy veteran, and I'm just about 58 years old. I served, though, between 1984 and 1988, and I didn't know the word transgender. All right, so I had to serve as a woman, which was, I liked the Navy. I wasn't happy with the uniform. I think standing at attention or parade rest for hours in an A-line skirt and heels is demeaning and extremely uncomfortable. And so, you know, that may seem like a minor thing, but when you're dealing with your identity internally, that's 2 hours of excruciating time, right? And you're looking across the inspection line at somebody standing in a Cracker Jack uniform. If you don't know what those are, it's literally the typical sailor uniform, and they have nice flat shoes, and they're wearing pants and, you know, and a special top, and it, you know, and you just know that they're extremely comfortable. So that was part of my experience. But, you know, as I was thinking about my experience as a trans person, and let me say that during that time, I didn't know the word transgender, didn't hear that word, know that word, understand that word until I was 45 years old. And all of a sudden I had a word and a definition of who I was, and the world changed for me. And so, but it did still, my gender identity, who I identified as, was still impacted in the military. In terms of, you know, feeling like me, to participate in the rifle precision drill team, was really affirming because, you know, we were one, and our uniforms were pretty much one. We all looked the same, just about. And so that was important to me. The other instance, and again, some of these seem minor perhaps to others that transitioned in the military, but when I was in Iceland, I played flag football. And for me, that was awesome, right? Because that was something I wasn't allowed to do as a child or up until that point. And when I say flag football, I think people forgot the flag part of that, because as I would line up, I got hit so many times hard without any equipment. And but I felt good about that, right? Because this is who I am, and I'm playing football. Until somebody informed another player on the other team that, man, you just really, sorry about that, you just really nailed that woman. And they're like, what? Oh my God, I'm so sorry, you know, and they're apologizing because they shouldn't have hit me like that. They shouldn't have been so tough. And I was just like, it was fine right up until 2 seconds ago. So, but it wasn't like when I transitioned, I looked totally different, because in my life outside of uniform during that whole time, there were times where I presented, you know, had to present as female according to society rules. But my appearance, my actions and such were what society would call very masculine. And I took some heat for that, but it wasn't too bad. So I'm going to fast forward to my transition, or when I finally heard the word transgender and made the decision to transition officially, change my name, so on and so forth. And then it became apparent that there are some issues for trans veterans. Number one, I figured I was silenced, right? My DD-214 no longer had real value for me, because the name on the DD-214 is Angela, you know, and I'm no longer Angela. So I can't use that DD-214 to prove that I'm a veteran without totally outing myself. And as we know, that's not safe in a lot of places. So, you know, even to this day, and Kristen and I are working on this question with DMV. DMV has you can get veteran stamped on your driver's license. And so, you know, you get the 10%, the 15% off, you get into this, you get that, you're identified in all of these ways without having to use your DD-214, but we're not sure you can actually get the veteran stamp without having to have your DD-214 and explaining why the name is different in all of this. And so for a long time, I just thought, you know, I'm doomed, right? I can say I'm a veteran. I don't really have the proof, right? The other thing that happens is really not sure, you know, where I stood with New York State veterans and their benefits versus federal veterans benefits, so on and so forth. And even how to, you know, if I could change my DD-214 and how to do that. And that process, even though it's in place, is not an easy process. And I heard someone else is going to speak to that, but that's very difficult. And it became, in my mind, became impossible between the years of 2016 and 2020. So that's a real, it's a real issue. And then also, you know, but I think it's important, not only am I out in state government, but I'm out as a trans man, because I think it's important for visibility in general, you know, particularly Transgender Day of Visibility. But I think 365, you know, trans men need to be visible as well. And it's not always the case, right? And so I think that's important. And to have conversations with people. And what I find is, as people get to know you, they're like, oh, like transgender people are just like people. And it's like, yeah, right. That's the way it is. So let me just, you know, so that's kind of my things. The other thing, and again, this seems minor perhaps, but I want to go back to the uniform, right? We have ways in which we celebrate, you know, Veterans Day. And one of the like ugh moments for me was when my nieces wanted me to go to their school and celebrate, you know, Veterans Day, and I'm the veteran in their family. And then they wanted a picture. And I was like, oh, what kind of picture is this? Like, because that's going to automatically out me, right? Because, and so now I'm in an audience, not only with elementary school kids, but all the other veterans. And everybody's going to know that the name Owen does not go with the picture. And so luckily they just kind of wanted more recent pictures. So that wasn't an issue. But that thing about being able to see myself. So, you know, if I ever win the lottery, I have some extra money, I'm going to get that uniform that I identify with, and I'm going to get my picture taken. Again, that's minor stuff. So the last thing I want to talk about is in parks and in other agencies, we talk about recruiting veterans, and we don't think we really reach enough veterans. There's a special program that's called the 55BC that helps veterans with disabilities. But the other thing is getting the word out to veterans, and particularly in my case, you know, trans veterans, helping them to restore their honor within New York State, help them to get through the appointment process or the hiring process, and also just recruiting, especially intentional recruiting to veterans as well. So again, thank you for letting me be here. Please reach out to me if you'd like at New York State Parks, and I'll put my info in the chat box. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Owen, and thank you for all your work. So proud to know you and to get to work with you. And we're going to come back to you with some questions for sure. So that's not your final word. Barbara Salva, I got to meet on Tuesday on Vietnam Veterans Day. So if you all weren't aware, Tuesday was Vietnam Veterans Day, and we had an incredible event that we partnered again with Ashton and Sage and so many great folks out in Hauppauge, New York, and our keynote speaker was Barbara Salva, who is an Air Force veteran, served in Vietnam, and a proud New Yorker, and proud to know you and get to hear your story. Barbara, if you could just take a few minutes to share your story. You know, it's truly inspiring, and again, like you know, we want to hear from you. Take it away, Barbara.
Well, thank you, Christine, and also thank you, Ashton, for yesterday. I was completely amazed yesterday. I mean, I said what I had to say, and it's my life story, it's my journey. And I thought it was just contained in that room. Well, let me tell you, I've got more telephone calls, emails, text messages, saying congratulations, what a wonderful story that I presented. It really made me feel wonderful. I mean, I really had no idea there was even a reporter in the room to put all this down. So I am really flabbergasted by the attention that I got, and I thank both of you for putting this together. And similar to Owen, I mean, I started cross-dressing at a very, very early age, and it worked up all my life. I mean, it's just been one thing after another. And as I mentioned yesterday, when I went into the service for 4 years in the Air Force, I didn't do any of that. But the thoughts were still there. They never went away. So what can I do? But immediately after I came back, I mean, then I had freedom to do it again. But unfortunately, I was living with my mom and dad right after service time. But I did meet the love of my life, and we got married shortly thereafter. And as I said yesterday, we were the same size. So it didn't take long for me to get into her clothes. And that stayed that way for nearly 10 years. She had no idea. I was very secretive, very much aware of what went on. Part of that was I was hired by United Airlines as a mechanic then. I'm a licensed aircraft mechanic. And I worked nights. She worked days. So I had the entire day to myself, just about. And it was like two ships passing in the night. I'd come home, she would go to work. And the rest of my life was in her clothes. And one day that was a deciding factor, that person that was looking back at me was really me. I thought before then, I just thought it was a passing thing, which lasted many, many years, but it was mostly a something erotic, but it was more than that. And that person looking back at me in that mirror, that sealed the deal. That stayed on for a few more years in secrecy. And finally I had to let go. When I told my wife, I mean, as of last May, we would be married 50 years. So we have a very long history together. But when I finally told her, it didn't go over very well. And I think that's really from her parents. They were never into the LGBT community at all. I can tell you stories about those two also. I mean, I loved them dearly, but they were just things that I didn't certainly appeal from them. But it took 30 years. And again, I would say loudly, because of my children, I have 3 adult children now. We stayed together, and we were miserable. We looked like the perfect couple going outside the door. It was a wonderful thing. But when we came home, it was just 2 people in the same room. There was certainly no intimacy, and it was just misery, until the point that I had to, about 13 years ago, when I decided to retire from United. My life changed big time. The airline changed. Everything at work, which was my peace to go to work, that changed. We separated. I had to live in another place. I had told my family, and that certainly didn't go over very big. To this day, of my 3 children, I lost my middle child. He hasn't spoken to me in close to 15 years. So it was a heartbreak throughout. I had to make a life for myself, which I have. But I must say, as trans visibility is a major talk here, I don't normally put a transgender sign on my head when I go out the door. I do what I do because of who I am. I'm a female. I should have been a female from day one. The good Lord and I have raised the roof on why he put me on the fence, not being all male or all female, one or the other. I did not choose this. It chose me. So again, when I go out shopping, flying, whatever, I'm Barbara. And I get a lot of nice compliments and doors open for me, and I have to work for it. And yeah, I lie a little bit because I've never born a child. And people will ask me when we compare notes as women, I have to think about what my ex has done or how she felt, even with menopause and those things that happen with naturally born women. I have to be careful of what I say. I don't out myself unless you're a doctor. However, I will say what happened yesterday has out me all over the place. And I don't know what the circumstances or what the ramifications are going to be. The 2 airplanes that are behind me in my background, I've been with this club for close to 5 years. I fly. I went into that club because it was financially accommodating for me. I went in there as a pilot, not as a transgender pilot, just as a pilot. Well, lo and behold, today I had received an email from one of the pilots that found out about me. Fortunately, this young lady congratulated me, and I was very surprised at that. My problem with that is what's going to happen if she says anything to anybody else. A lot of these guys, I have no idea what their thought process is regarding transgender, the transgender community. So I don't really know. We'll have to see. Knowing that, if some people that have already contacted me and they have contacts beyond themselves, are my children going to find out? Now, all my children know. My grandchildren, to my knowledge, don't know. So that's a problem. I don't want to cause problems any more than I have in the family. And like I said yesterday, when I go see them, when I see my children and my grandchildren, I have to cross-dress back as a male. And it's very, very difficult. My body has changed tremendously. I have to do really what lesbians would do, from female to male. I bind myself up. I have to look like this old guy. I mean, I'm 76 years old, so it's difficult. I have to take everything off, and it just kills me to do that. But I have to do what I have to do in order to see them. So it does have its problems. Again, I walk around this earth just as I am. I've been out of the country. I've been out of the state. Oh, another thing too, I want to tell, where did she go? The lady that was up from Jenna. I am so happy that I live in New York State. The way the United States has gone, we're going backwards. I think we're beyond 1950. It's horrible, absolutely horrible. Living in New York State, I've got everything at my fingertips. I go to the VA here in Northport. They cannot be more generous to me, more acceptable to me than any place that I've ever been to. It took a little time to get there once I found out what avenue to go. But once they accepted me, it's been just wonderful. So I can't thank them enough. With that, the rest of New York State, hey, it's a great place to live, even though it's very expensive. But I'd stay here for the rest of my life compared to Texas, Tennessee, Alabama, you name all the South states, and even up the center. So I thank New York State for being who they are. I mean, I can go on and on and on as, to tell you about my life. We got a lot of stories. I've been told I can write a book, and I probably could, but
hope
I'm
you
not
do,
going to do
Barbara.
that here.
We'll definitely come back to you with questions for sure.
Absolutely. But thank you very much. I appreciate it. And thank you for inviting me.
Oh, so proud to have you as part of this program. And your experience is so important to hear. I want to go next to Dale Pierce, who is also an Air Force veteran. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Yes. Where did I write your name? Yes, Air Force veteran, and who comes to us through SAGEVets also, and who have been wonderful, and it's been a wonderful experience to hear your story, Dale, and to get to know you a little bit. Could you share some of your story with us?
Sure. But listening to Owen and Barbara's stories moved me so much. Barbara, I'm only a year older than you are. And Owen, when I was a child, there was no such term as transgender. And I met Marsha in New York at a pride parade. And the reference to Christine Jorgensen, I see myself as a little boy, 7 years old, in Malone, New York, sitting with a Sunday paper, reading the story and saying, that's me. That's me. But my story, I was 17 when I enlisted in the Air Force. my boyfriend was stationed, he was in the Air Force and he was stationed in Syracuse, which is where I'm from. I made it through basic, God knows how, but I did. And then I was sent to Lackland Air Force, to Goodfellow Air Force Base for school. And while I was there, at one point I was waiting for security clearance. And one day I was doing menial jobs around the base. And one day I was called to my quarters and all of my possessions were on my bed. The doors, all of the drawers were opened up and two very scary, imposing men were standing there. They identified themselves as ISO agents and they told me that I was being charged, and it's kind of vague now. I think I went into just a panic kind of. And so from that, I was interrogated for 3 days. They showed me pictures of other Air Force personnel. They tried to trap me into admitting to things that I had not done. They showed me pictures of other airmen and women and to identify them as LGBT, gay, lesbian. I didn't. I'm glad I didn't know any of them, but I wouldn't have told them anyway. As scary as it was, I would not have told them. Then one night, some drunken airmen broke into my room. They beat me up. And then I was transferred to the military hospital where I stayed for 3 to 4 months waiting for my paperwork. I really, and then I buried it. There was no counseling. At one point, Kristen said, what would have made a difference? What could they have done? And what they could have done, or would have, somebody reached out to me, tell me that I wasn't alone, that I was a scared, barely 18-year-old kid, that, but no one spoke to me. However, the base commander, after the incident, after the violence, he did reach out to me. He called me into his office and he offered me protection. And to understand the significance of that, this is 1961. I mean, it's nothing short of amazing that this man at this point in time and the way the LGBTQ community was viewed could be so kind. But he did, and he told me that if I was harassed or threatened in any way, and there was an incident, I was in the BX, I had made some friends, and an airman went by and he called me a queer or something like that. And I contacted the base commander, and in my presence, he was an airman first class, he pulled his stripes. And it was a message that no one was, that wasn't going to happen to me or to anyone else. And so eventually my paperwork was found and I came home, but I had no story. And I came home in shame. And I buried it. And it wasn't until I read the Sage newsletter about this very brave serviceman who had gone through what I had gone through. And as I'm reading it, I'm thinking, well, that's my story. And then I reached out to Sage locally, and then met my angel here, Ashton, and also Benjamin, who had stood by me so much. And again, there was no such word as gender. But when I transitioned finally, my third try, I went to my brother and he said, well, this is no surprise. You were cross-dressing when we were little kids. And it was true. Barbara identified with what you said. As soon as my mother was out of the house, I was in her clothes. And I was called a sissy boy. I was called a girly boy. That's what I was called, because there was no such thing as transgender. but later on, I started reading about people like April Ashley, like other trans women. And my first attempt was I went to California and I was 21. But, and again, the quality of the trans women's lives that I met was so bad. They were sex workers, and then the brutality. And I was alone. I was 21 years old and I was all alone. There was no internet. There was no support group. I was totally alone. So I just gave up and came back home, and life went on. And then finally, when I thought it was much too late for me, I was seeing a great therapist, and with the internet, and I found out that it wasn't unusual for somebody my age to transition. So at 70 years old, I transitioned completely. And I've had nothing but support. I took the easy route. I did the androgynous route because I had always been so feminine. And so I did it bit by bit by bit. But within a year, this is who I am. The pronouns have been a little difficult for people who have known me for so long, but I have been very fortunate. Having said that, I cannot fly safely. One of my dearest friends is in North Carolina, and I cannot fly safely. I read the stories, and regardless of how feminine I appear and how easily I move through life, but I can't fly because I could be pulled out of line. And if I'm alone, there's no one to protect me. So yes, have we made progress? We have made progress. But is it still a scary place? One night as I was leaving a SAGE meeting, a car started following me. They were waiting for one of the trans people to come out. And at first I thought, you're being a drama queen. Then I started making lefts, and they made lefts, and they made rights. So finally what I wound up doing was pulling into a driveway and turning off the lights, and I watched them go by. And that was 2 years ago. So, yes, so much progress. And I experience that every day. But on the other hand, I'm not foolish enough to know that I'm still not in danger. There are still places I can't go. There are still people that are threatening. However, for me, I have made the decision that the last chapter of my life is going to be who I always was meant to be. I took my middle name, fortunately, which was Dale, so I didn't have to go through, my family went through enough, so I had been Dale since I was 18, so it was fine. But I have a supportive family. My brother is my rock. My brother is everything. But I am surrounded by support. But this chapter, and now I knew nothing about the Restoration of Honor Act. I didn't know that that was even there for me. And I find it somewhat ironic that the very institution that threw me away over 50 years ago now may actually help me have a quality of life that I can't have, that I don't have. I still work full time, and I love what I do. I'm a hairstylist. And by the way, Owen, I'm a photographer. You can look me up. When you get your uniform, I will come to you or you come to me. I will do a killer portrait of you, and you can count on it. I want to thank everybody. This is unbelievable. And listening to these stories, other people's stories, before I found SAGE and the group, I was alone. I had no trans friends. I was all alone. And then finding the group and finding people who could help me was wonderful. So I know there are other stories, and I love listening to other people's stories. So I thank you very much for having me here and listening to me.
Thank you so much, Dale. We are here as your community and to support you. And I am so grateful for you and your willingness to share all of that. I am like, this is so moving. And, but I definitely want to get to our next panelist, Lindsay Church, a Navy veteran and co-founder and current executive director of Minority Veterans of America. Not in New York, but we'll have you visit New York soon, I hope. Please share with us what you have to say.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And I'm not a New Yorker. I feel like a New Yorker by proxy because Kristen and I talk so much, and she shares so much about what you all are doing. And I think it's amazing. And Barbara, you talked about those southern states. I happen to live in Virginia. And let me tell you, it's a very scary place to live. I'm from, I'm third generation Navy. My mom was Navy, my grandfather. We had two uncles that were in Air Force, but we don't talk about them very much. Because, you know, family rivalries are what they are. I joined the Navy. I served as a lesbian not an out lesbian, because I served from 2008 to 2012. At the time, you all talked about language, and I think that's very affirming for me because I came out as trans non-binary last year at the age of 35. I've always been this way. I've always looked this way. I've never been any different, but nothing, you know, oh, and you had mentioned nothing really changed about you except the language. But I think it's also important to note that I don't know any non-binary people that are older than me. There aren't very many theys out there that are older than myself that I've met because language, we didn't have that affirming language. And I'm so grateful to know so many theys that are younger than me and know that like the work and the things that you all endured and we've endured are making an impact somewhere, even though some days it really doesn't feel like it. Some days we feel like we're just going back many, many, many decades. But, you know, Barbara, Dale, you all are examples of exactly where progress has taken us and where, you know, that fight, where it matters and where all of it made an impact because you two live authentically as yourselves and we're the people that you are, we get to live as ourselves today. So I hope you take that, know that, and carry that because you all fought for this. I often say that we stand on the shoulders of giants, and that is every person that stood before us. And so thank you for all of that. I served in the Navy from 2008 to 2012. All but 3 months of my service were under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. For anybody and everybody that served under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, it was a horrible policy. It ruined a lot of people's lives. The policy itself was so destructive to every fiber of your being and destroyed this connectedness that you had between your veteran identity and your queer self. I know when I got out of the military, I really struggled to be authentically and genuinely either a veteran or queer. I never knew how to put them together because someone somewhere told me they couldn't be together. You know, early on in my career, I was told if I came to the racks, came to the boot camp to find somebody to get in the racks with, I came to the wrong place. I almost got Article 15 out for recruit contact with another woman. I was, you know, I had Dale, you talked about protective. I had, you know, folks that were in genuine and authentically trying to protect me that would tell me that you need to grow your hair out and find a gay boyfriend. And that was like the continued harassment and transphobia. Like bottom line, without the language, that stuff was transphobic. They were pushing you into a box and continually telling you, this is where femininity lies, and this is where you're going to live if you want to be here. Not a lot of people talk, the military trans ban is like a household name, but not very many people talk about non-binary people still can't serve authentically as themselves. If I wanted to join the military today, I would have to do so as a woman. I wouldn't be able to use they, them pronouns, would probably still get in trouble for wearing male uniforms, even though I did it anyways, because they were far more comfortable. Oh, and you talked about those skirts. I never put one of those on. Absolutely not. So I think the military itself is changing and we are seeing progress. But at the end of the day, intersex people are still outright banned. Non-binary people still cannot serve as themselves. So the culture itself has not changed that much. there's still just as much hatred and for the people that we are in the service as there was 20 years ago when there was a policy that was in place. All of these policies impact whether or not culture adopts change, and culture so far has not done so. I was medically retired in 2012 after some pretty intense medical debacles, but I returned home to a community that I didn't know how to be a part of. I didn't know how to be queer because queer people did not like veterans. That whole anti-militarization and, all of that, we were not accepted. A lot of people, I think, looked at me like a warmonger just because I made a decision to get my life out of poverty, because that's what I was inheriting, was poverty. And so for me, joining the military was the best outcome that I could expect for my life. And yet the queer community rejected that. And so it took a lot of breaking that down to be able to be who I am today. But the veteran community absolutely did not like us, did not want to talk about it. I was a post commander of an American Legion, and the very first night as commander, I was told it's okay that that you're queer, but you don't need to talk about your wife. That was my first night leading a post into the 21st century. I was really going to be lucky if I got us to the 20th. So this was the community that I was a part of. I also founded an SV, or a student veteran department at the campus of the University of Washington that I was one day forced out of. Why? Because I like to talk too much about minorities. Turns out that was actually my calling. So in 2017, 12 days after the trans ban was announced, me and one of my good friends came together and said, all right, enough is enough. We had seen the abortion laws were changing. We had seen the Muslim ban, the first women's march, the trans ban, and I finally decided that this could not stand because our communities are so small. It's only 134,000 transgender veterans. Do you think that we can move policy? Not without help. Same thing around the rest of the minority communities that we work with. We built this intersectional coalition of people to say no more. We're not going to do this anymore. You're not going to harm our communities. You're not going to implement policies that bring back generations of harm that we can expect to happen to the next generation of trans people. We were lucky and fortunate, not luck, we worked our butts off to see the end of that policy in 2021, but not before, hundreds of thousands of trans people were thrust into chaos because of a stupid policy via tweet. Those things destroyed lives and harmed people and implemented policies that destroyed the mental health outcomes of generations of people. Today, Barbara, you talked about the VA being great. I use the Richmond VA, and it really depends policy to policy, or place to place, how people adopt the changes. It all changes based off of where you are. Last December, I was trying to use the restroom at the Richmond VA. I was using, the women's restroom because that was the closest thing that I'm ever going to find sometimes. And a staff member followed me to the door of the bathroom and said there was a man in the women's restroom. A staff member, a VA staff member, harassing patients when I came out of the bathroom because, there's nothing more vulnerable than while you're going to the bathroom to be shouted at by a staff member. I asked him, why? And he said, I have to protect the patients and the staff. I am the patient. I am the person. We are the people that you should be protecting. We are the people that you should be building this culture for. So we have a lot of fights ahead. A lot of advocacy has to be done to change the system as a whole. Most people don't even know that we don't collect sexual orientation or gender identity in the Department of Veterans Affairs. We have no idea how many trans veterans there are. All of this stuff is done by population samples and, survey data. We have no idea because right now we don't count. So Trans Day of Visibility is absolutely imperative to our future and to seeing us. And the laws and policies have to come with it because right now we don't know what the health outcomes are for our community. We have a major issue around what is happening to our community: homelessness, suicide, mental health crisis, all of these major trends. We can't pull that apart to see how our community has been destroyed and impacted and devastated by these policies. So that's what I do now. It's one of my favorite things to do is yell at Congress and say, we have to do something better to be able to support these communities and make sure that we have everything that we need.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. Yeah, snaps all the way around. And also, I just want to brag for a moment on Lindsay. They have an op-ed in Military Times today for Trans Day of Visibility. I'll drop that link in the chat momentarily. But I also want to get to some of our experts. Like, so we have veterans, but then we also have our experts on this wonderfully full and rich panel. I want to talk with Peter Perkowski, who's an attorney serving as counsel for Minority Veterans of America, has also worked in the past with Harvard and Yale's veterans law clinics, and has just a world of expertise. And Peter, if you could just share some of the legal issues that you've seen in serving trans, non-binary, gender non-conforming, intersex veterans, and what we should be looking for as service providers, as a community, to be able to do better.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for asking me to be here. By the way, although I'm coming to you from native land that we now call Los Angeles, I spent the first 22 and a half years of my life in New York, and I'm even sipping out of my University of Rochester mug. So shout out to all my good people in Western New York, and go Bills. So yes, thank you. Most of my work in this space is as an advocate and a legal services provider, and that includes people who currently serve. So I was one of the counsel on one of the 4 legal cases that challenged the trans ban. There are still cases I'm involved in what we call the HIV ban, which is still ongoing. But a lot of my work for veterans focuses on righting the wrongs of the past, right? So I've heard the stories here today from many of you who experienced not just trauma, but outright wrongdoing. A few of you talked about cross-dressing. There are cases of actual courts martial, for gender non-conforming behavior in the military, including gender non-conforming behavior that happened in private. So there's there's a history of wrongdoing against trans people who served. That includes administrative discharges for the pathologizing of the identity. So misconduct-related discharges, discharges for medical reasons or psychosocial disorders, they call them. So there's a lot of cleanup that we have to do. And then Owen talked about having a useless DD-214, essentially, right? A lot of the work that I do has to do with changing those DD-214. So getting name changes for trans veterans so that their identity documents are not conflicting with their DD-214, and they can actually use it for the things that it's intended to be used for. But also cleaning up those other things. If you have a DD-214 that reflects information that is offensive to your person, perhaps it says you were discharged for psychosocial disorder or parasocial. There's a lot of offensive terminology they used to use, and actually still do in recent times, because they just don't understand the trans experience, right? It wasn't usually dysphoria that caused people to be discharged. It's the well, and sometimes it was because serving in the identity that doesn't match your authentic self was very difficult, as we've heard these stories. But part of the difficulty, even when serving openly was possible in that small period of time, I've heard a lot of stories about people who were just misunderstood. They were treated poorly. They were charged with misconduct because they acted out in terms of protecting their space and insisting that they be respected, right? So you're a bad person because you insist that that people use the correct pronouns in your correct name. It just is a mess. So a lot of my work is that work, and that's what I do.
Oh, that is so important, Peter, and thank you for all of those insights. And the DD-214 correction process is it's it's maddeningly long for no discernible reason.
Yeah,
And
let me just mention it. So it used to be, yes, you had to go to the boards for the correction of military records, and the only one that could do that was the highest board for each of the services. 3 of the service branches just came out with administrative policies where you can go directly to the Department of the Navy, Department of the Army, or the Department of, what am I missing?
Marines.
Army, Navy, Air Force.
Air Force is the only one who didn't do it. Air Force, you still got to go to the board. So we have 3 policies. Oh, Marine Corps, sorry. Even though they're under the Navy, sorry for any Marines out there that we consider them a wholly owned subsidiary. But but for Marine Corps, Navy, and Army, you can go to the department and get that administrative change. But I can help with that. There are a lot of agencies. I'm sure some of them are on the listening to the chat who do this work as well. And there's resources out there to help you.
Fantastic. So, and we will follow up with an email. Look for an email from me as a follow-up in a couple days. I'll mention this again with that includes resources that we talk about and further information. So, but thank you so much, Peter. I want to introduce Julie Gray Owens, who I was also really pleased to meet in person this week, and just a career of inspiring work, advocacy for transgender rights and equality here in New York. She is the executive director of Gender Equality New York, and I want to ask Julie to talk about the challenges that you've seen for veterans or for trans folks broadly in New York. We've done a tremendous amount of work thanks to you and other advocates, tremendous progress in this state, but what do we still have to do? What do we need to keep working on to get right?
Thank you, Kristen. First of all, I want to tell everyone how honored I am to be on this panel with all these amazing people who have served our country. I'm from a generation that was too young for Vietnam and too old for Afghanistan and the Gulf Wars. So my whole life, I've been protected by veterans, both in my younger age to today. And I can't tell you how much I love this country and how much I love the people who serve us and protect us. So I think it's really important to make that statement for those of us who are unable to serve. My dad was a Korean vet and went through a lot of issues after serving. But I will say that the Veterans Administration was amazing in taking care of him in his care till his final days here on Long Island. But my story is obviously a little bit different because I didn't serve in the service. I didn't come out until 2003. And when I did, I started learning some of the issues that our community was facing. And when I talk about our community, I'm talking about not only transgender people who may be binary, but I'm also talking about non-binary people. And I'm also talking about the small community of people called intersex people. All 3 of these communities are, as we've heard already, just terribly treated, almost forgotten, and are really considered a throwaway people. So the work that we started doing back in 2003, the biggest thing is to get civil rights for our community, which took us 16 years. In 2003, gays and lesbians were given all their civil rights, but it wasn't until January of 2019 that we were able to finally receive civil rights. And by civil rights, we're really talking about just the ability to sue people for discrimination. Prior to that, if we went into a restaurant, we could be told, I'm sorry, we don't serve your kind, get out. If we wanted to rent an apartment or buy a house, we were told, no, we don't do that with you. So much so that there were doctors that would push us away, well, we don't deal with your kind of people, find another doctor. So there's a lot of issues that we faced early on, and we're still facing in a lot of different areas. I can tell you that what was even more disturbing was in 2015, before we had our civil rights, the New York State advocacy organization for gays, lesbians, bisexuals, transgender, etc., decided to close up shop before we had our civil rights. And their ending message was, mission accomplished, which was a horrible impact on our community. And what happened at that time is that we realized we were doing a lot of work here on Long Island. Barbara Salva was very much a part of the work that we were doing here on Long Island, but we realized that the work had to be done on more of a statewide basis. And so we started reaching out to other advocates around the state, one of whom is on our call today, which is Owen. And with Owen, with Barbara, and a number of advocates around the state, we created Gender Equality New York, which is a nonprofit and advocates for transgender, non-binary, and intersex people here in New York State. And we've actively worked to get finally our civil rights passed in January of 2019. We were also able to get the gay and trans panic defense ban passed here in New York State, where it was an allowed legal technique to get people to have a lesser sentence by saying, well, yes, I did kill a trans person, but I went out of my mind and that's why I lost it. So that can't be used here in New York State anymore. There was also the Walking While Trans bill, which was just passed last year, where literally police were going after transgender people just for, being on the corner, talking with friends, or wearing a short skirt or too low cut a blouse. That type of insane type of over policing. And we were able to, help get the GRA passed, which is the Gender Recognition Act, which is where we've now added the X marker in so many areas here in New York State. However, today, the work that we feel is most important is continuing our education work. I currently am training both at the Nassau County Police Academy, the Suffolk County Police Academy. In the past 4 months, I've trained the police force in Fallsburg, New York, and in Liberty, New York. And we are currently working on legislation. The legislation that we're working on right now is called the Gender Identity, Respect, Dignity, and Safety Act. It is literally a jail and prison protection bill that will protect our community members while they're being incarcerated. And this is, to us, the next most important thing that has to be done in New York State to protect community members that are mostly minority, mostly poor. And in fact, and I did some lookup before this, there's a significant number of veterans who are either incarcerated in jails or prisons right now. And so if they're members of our community, they need to be protected. And this is the type of work that we're doing. So again, I think this panel is amazing, and I want to thank everyone on this panel for your stories and the work that you're doing. It's just simply incredible. In the meantime, we civilians will continue to work on the stuff that has to be done here in New York State. And I hope everyone realizes that the next thing that we need to do is federal legislation, specifically the Equality Act, which is basically LGBTQI+ civil rights in the United States of America. Thanks.
Wow, yeah, snaps for Julie. Thank you so much. That really just centers all of everybody's stories on the urgency of equality and understanding and education about we are all just people, and we all deserve to have a chance to be our authentic selves, whether that's in military service, in seeking social services or veteran services, or just walking as free people in a free country. Ashton, we could not have had this incredible panel today without you. Ashton, could you say a few words about what we need to do to continue serving our LGBTQ, our trans, non-binary, intersex, and gender non-conforming veterans?
Yes, thank you so much, Kristen. Happy Transgender Day of Visibility to everybody. It's so nice to see everybody here today who I have met at one time or another, except for Peter. But I've been introduced to Yale. You've got an amazing veteran program. And one of the next steps that we're talking about is marriage equality and how that has impacted people trying to get survivor benefits for members of families who were partners with and married to members of the military who've retired and whatnot. So that will be continued after today. But what do we do next? Well, we've done some great things. First and foremost, I'm Ashley Stewart, SAGEVets Program Manager. I'm an ally. I feel extremely privileged to work with people like we have on this panel today and with DVS. Sage took a shot with me, and I've always been extremely grateful for that day back in May 2018. We've had great success because of the giants that we have partnered with, and for the giants that have laid the groundwork for this history to start these changes in policy and respect and dignity. The program we did this week to recognize and acknowledge National Vietnam Veterans Day was powerful. We got not only a proclamation from Governor Hochul, incredibly powerful and supportive. We also got a proclamation of support from the President of the National Vietnam Veterans of America, stating in writing that they support LGBTQ+ vets who have been ignored by their government, their military, and sometimes fellow vets. It was incredible to read that, and I was just so moved by getting it. And restoration of honor, New York's such a leader in this legislation. There's 6 states now with active ROH legislation. There are a few others in the process of putting it out there. I testified before Maryland with their delegates recently because they have introduced the bill and it's looking like it could pass hopefully soon. And also Maine is working on it, California. So we could soon be in the double digits for a policy like this. And also the VA is really making an effort. There are some gaps. It's a big cultural shift that we're looking at here. Don't Ask, Don't Tell ended 10 years ago. Transgender ban was re-implemented briefly, but then ended again with the new administration. But the VA has LGBT veteran care coordinators at every medical facility. They also have specialized services that we focused on last November when we did a program with them for Transgender Awareness Month. They have gender affirming hormone therapy, laser hair removal, prosthetics, voice therapy, fertility preservation, and mental health services. And also they're going to be unrolling gender affirming surgeries soon. They've got the green light to do it. They're just in the process now of trying to piece it all together and figure out what needs to be outsourced and things like that. And one step further, vet centers across the state allow people who served, regardless of their discharge, to come in, just have a talk and see how they can be supported through the VA, through the vet center. So I'm going to put my name in the chat, my email. I'm always available. So thank you again, Kristen, for putting this program together. I'm going to leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ashton. And it is wonderful to partner with you on an ongoing basis. We've worked together for years in my various roles, and again, like this, to be able to put together a program like we have today, to work with you and also with minority veterans. I mean, just this is so important, and this is such an important conversation, and I'm thankful for everything that you do. So lightning round. What do you wish every service provider for veterans knew about this community? Lindsay.
I don't know why I felt that was coming my way. I think some folks actually pointed to it, that we are just human beings, just regular old people, just trying to get access to care in that day. You know, it's really important to affirm a person when they come through. I think we do a lot of training with individual providers and how to restore that dignity and build those trustful relationships. And part of it is just asking questions. Hi, my name is Lindsay Church. I use they, them pronouns. How about you? Asking people how they want to be identified. I live in the South, everybody likes to use ma'am and sir and Mr. and Mrs. and just asking people, can you call me Lindsay? I don't find respect or dignity in that, in Miss or Mrs. or being identified in that way. So I think one of it is just really destigmatizing basic conversation with your people and figuring out how can I, restore the most dignity that I can in these conversations and in my providing and my relationship with you, and just giving as much as you can of yourself to folks that, like we talked about on this call, it's really hard to live like this. And it's really hard to police people's language on a regular basis. Please use they, them pronouns. Please don't call me Miss Church. I don't want to do that. So every person in my life that's willing to take that extra step, willing to have that conversation, to tell somebody else, actually, that's not a he. That's actually a they. You know, those types of things actually restore dignity and a little tiny glimmer of hope and faith in the society that we live in, that maybe, just maybe, it's going to be okay. And so just take some time and really learn as much as you possibly can. Have as many conversations with beautiful human beings like you're seeing on this call, and just realize we're just regular people trying to live our lives as our full and authentic selves without having to hide it from anybody.
Awesome. And snaps. Dale, what do you wish folks had known or that folks knew now in serving veterans like yourself? And we'll pull you off of mute here. Can you unmute yourself, Dale?
That's a big question. And there are so many different layers to this. But for me, a scared, just barely 18-year-old kid, somebody would have paid attention to me and would have made me feel like this wasn't the end of the world, and that somewhere in the system there were people who would care about me, help me to process this experience, help me, give me the tools to go back. How do I explain this? And now 60 years later, I am processing something that happened to me when I was 17. And that's why the tears. And I mentioned to my therapist, I came back with a severe sleep disorder. And within the last month, I am sleeping better than I've ever slept in my life. It's amazing to me. I have never been able to get through a night, ever. And suddenly, with the support that I'm receiving from the people around me, Ashton, Benjamin, the people in my life, I sent the article to my nephews and some of my family members. My nephews weren't born when this happened. I had never spoken about it. They didn't know this. They didn't know that this had happened to me. So I wish that anybody who's going through this, that they would be given the tools to help them process through it. I was not. I had to bury it. It was the only way I could survive, was to bury it. And now, talking about it all these years later, I realized the damage that it has caused me. But because I am by nature optimistic, I also think that there's something very miraculous about this experience now, that something that happened so long ago, that people are reaching out to me. People are saying, we want to help you. People are saying, how do you feel? What did this matter? What did this mean to you? It means everything. It means everything.
I'm so glad, Dale, and you deserve a full night's sleep. You've deserved it all along.
Okay.
And I'm glad. I'm so glad. And again, we are here. We are your community, and we are here for you.
And I'm grateful.
Yeah. So proud to have you here. Owen, what do you wish that everybody knew in serving this population?
Yeah, thanks. It goes to not only medical, but Peter, you touched on it a little bit. Mental health. There's this misconception that trans, non-binary, intersex people are they're just unstable, right? They're depressed all the time, or they're anxious, or any of those things. And geez, they got to see therapists. And not only all the stigma of mental health in the United States, but particularly associating the TGNCNB community with being unstable, right? Having mental health issues, as if that is just ingrained in us because of who we are. And that's not the case. But I ask you this, and I ask people this, if society and families and friends, the military, is telling you that you are wrong, not what you're doing, but your very being is wrong, how would you feel? How would you feel going through life knowing you're being judged like that? People are acting against you that way. And you know what? A lot of people also, people from our community are fearful of the mental health system because a lot of times you're written off for, well, again, you're trans, so obviously, you have mental health, and not helping people work through that. And I was very fortunate and had a wonderful therapist. I think everyone ought to have one, because let's face it, society and life is difficult, just in general. But I can tell you that the weight was lifted off me when I finally had a word and an understanding that there were people like me out there in the world surviving. That weight that's lifted off your shoulders, and that people care, is very important. So I think that if anything, I try to really give that message that this can be, mental health issues can be debilitating, and it's not necessarily innate to the individual or because they're transgender. It's a reflection of what happens to us. So I think that's really important. Thanks for asking.
Thank you so much, Owen. And that was just an excellent, important point. We are nearing the end of our program here. And before I give Barbara the final word on our program, I just want to let everybody know that we are recording this, and we'll make this video available on our agency YouTube channel. And look for, within the next day or two, a follow-up email from me listing many of the resources that we talk about here today. And please let me know if we can continue to connect you with resources, answers, and organizations that we talked about here today. But so definitely we will follow up, and you will have this video available to you. But I want to give the final word to Barbara on what you wish service providers for veterans, for the trans community, what do people need to know?
I think they all need, I think where I come from, education is on the top of my list. Most people have a different idea of what we are, who we are. Yes, as Owen said, we're crazy, because we were born one way and we're acting another way. That's absolutely ridiculous. We didn't choose this at all. This was given to us through the grace of God for whatever reason. The people around me, society, need to understand that we're human like everybody else. And for every human being on earth, there's a different personality. And we all have our share of not being what they call normal. I always said the only thing that's normal is a setting on your dryer. We are so different from one person to another. And people need to sit down and just listen. When I do my transgender Day of Remembrance in November, I invite anybody and everybody, just sit down and listen. You may get a little bit of education there just for the hour and a half that we have our event. Just listen, and you see that there's a lot to be learned. I think it's gotten better, but then, sometimes there's 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. And so that's where I'm coming from for the most part. If you give me an audience that wants to listen, I'm there. I can talk a storm. But when I go out to the supermarket, I'm just Barbara. I do my thing. I'm respectful. Whatever you give out, whatever you expect from yourself, you have to give out. It's a two-way street. So education, I think, is top notch, top of the list. And if you need something, go find it. I mean, in this day and age, we have Google. Google's got everything on earth. And if you don't like what Google says on one thing, look around and find something else. But don't sit there and fester and feel beaten up. You know, get up and go and do what you got to do. It'll get you moving. It'll make you feel young, but it'll also give you an education as well. And I thank you all for putting this presentation together. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Barbara. Thank you to each and every one of our panelists. Thank you, SAGEVets. Thank you, Minority Veterans of America. Thank you, Gender Equality New York. Thank you to everybody who signed on with us and spent your time with us learning. Keep asking questions, and I will get back with you by email soon. But this concludes our event. You all are invisible no more. Happy Transgender Day of Visibility, everyone. Thank you for joining us.